really truly historic. I don't think there's ever been a gathering of NGOs in the drug policy field from all around the world ever.
These compromises also keep us in the ball game.
And now you've been excluded.
Inform more people about what harm reduction really means.
It's very difficult for some of our drug war officials to make threats when the world knows that in a few months things could change quite a bit in the United States.
I will officially open the session Beyond 2008. I've always wanted to do that. I've seen that.
This is the only formally accepted channel through which civil society, working with the Vienna NGO Committee, can feed in documents into the drafting process for the political declaration.
And it's been really inspiring to see people from literally all over the world and all across the political spectrum when it comes to this issue, from your most ardent prohibitionists to people who favor ending drug prohibition or legalizing drugs per se, and everybody in between.
So this was a real test case. There's no system set up for NGO input on an ongoing basis for UNODC or CND. So our test in some ways is, and it's for both sides, they think we're crazy, we think they're crazy, but we actually have to work together in this particular case because we both, in our ways, have to come up with the same, document.
The least I hope is that the networking that will happen in the next 3 days will inform more people about what harm reduction really means.
The Beyond 2008 should consider the harm reduction strategy as a complementary work for the supply and demand reduction strategies.
We participate in the Beyond 2008 process because it is important to be well informed and to listen to all the other voices, and also to have our voice heard, as our experience every day working with people who are suffering from addiction.
What I expect from this meeting is hoping that we can reach consensus on some important issues to further and make better the United Nations Drug Control Program.
One of our goals is to ensure that young people who are affected ultimately by drug policies are included in the decisions around how those drug policies are formed.
My hope is that in the end we'll come up with some recommendations and some resolutions that emphasize treating drug users as human beings, recognizing the human rights of drug users and respecting the human rights of drug users in drafting global drug policy moving forward.
It will set up the scene right for all of us all over the world, and on the other hand creating a more supportive environment for primary prevention, treatment and rehabilitation as well.
What was disappointing was the whole process is very political. There is very less substantive discussion. People just take positions and stick to those positions without really reasoning out or being willing to hear the other side.
What I came and found was a small minority of the delegates that didn't want to have an open forum. They wanted to keep everything just the way it is, even though we need to move into the future. And maybe you captured some of this on film. You could see what the conflicts were. And the conflicts were that a large group of people who are affected by drug use and drug violence are being excluded from the conversation. And then, at least my hope was that the world could see that from the work that you're doing with your cameras. excluded. And so that's very frustrating. And I want to make one point clear about the American delegation. It's a large delegation, but it's a divided delegation, and it's only a small minority of the American delegation that is holding everybody hostage to this ugly, bully philosophy.
Not just the bullying, but the fact that a small minority of people with small views were given incredible credence, credibility, and were allowed to control the agenda so often.
Just the fact that there is an NGO consultation here in Vienna, I think really speaks to the power of how weakened perhaps our State Department has become. That you know, they would have blocked this 5 years ago or done whatever they could behind the scenes to prevent this kind of thing from happening. And I think they lack the power now to do that. Where the United States is bogged down in a lot of foreign policy quagmires, and there's very little political capital left to spend on these kinds of issues. Plus, it's very difficult for some of our drug war officials to make threats when the world knows that in a few months things could change quite a bit in the United States.
I think we met and exceeded our expectations. We had everybody in the room. We actually got to consensus, and but for a final potential disaster, we had young people leading the way forward and allowing us to have consensus. So yes, I'm very happy with the results.
I've been very pleasantly surprised that, first of all, there's been a lot of willingness to compromise. There's been a lot of expertise in the room, which is not always you can say about the government meetings. A lot of expertise thrashing through some very complex issues in a spirit of trying to find compromise.
Consensus in some ways feels not good because it means a lot of concessions. We lost having people use drugs as being the essential population in this document. And for those of us that work in harm reduction, it's unconscionable that we would do our work without involving people who use drugs. And yet it's not in this document now. And I think part of that is also that we need to come out with a document that's not going to be rejected out of hand by CND. So these compromises also keep us in the ball game. If we can survive this, then we can ask for more and greater input from civil society and the NGOs from around the world to actually affect change in the long term. Coming out of this meeting, there's no great expectation this document is going to do anything substantial, but we are going to come up with a document that we can live with. And we've come out of this process as a group of people, as NGOs from around the world, who shows that we can work together. And I think the harm reduction movement and the drug policy movement's involvement in this has shown that within our groups we can work together strategically, and I think we've shown that we can work within the UN process again.
Our sense is that the more important event to be looking at are events that are occurring between 2015 and 2018. That's the time when prohibition is really going to be on its last legs. In 10 years' time, and if we build towards that, I think we can change things, but 2009 is going to come and go without any change.
NGO voice will not necessarily be very widely heard further, because at the upcoming meeting of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, where the review of the achievements of the UNGAS or implementation of the UNGAS on drugs will be done, their NGOs will receive only 10 minutes to make presentation of what they think.
It's a calling card for every NGO in the world now that can go forward to their respective governments and say, this is not just me, Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse, this is all of us together who believe this. And if we want to work together, here's where we need to go. So it's a calling card for everybody.